Do you love snuggling up under the covers with a good book to read, especially if it's cold outside like it is right now in the US? Do you love being transported to that place and time that is being described in that book? Do books offer you inspiration for your travels? Well, I'm here to share many ways that books, I'm a book lover, can help you kind of get inspired for your next trip. Hello, welcome to Solo Travel Adventures. I'm Cheryl Esch, your podcaster and book lover here. I have read so many books. I average about 50 books a year, and I do make sure that I include in my reads during the year that I read some travel books, of course, right? I love reading travel books for a number of reasons. And so you may ask, well, what does reading have to do with travel? Quite a bit. There are so many travel books out there. There are travel resource books, but what I love to read are travel writings, whether they are memoirs of someone who has gone a certain place. Maybe it's someone who has traveled nomadically. And so they're kind of sharing that life that they've lived. And there's some that are more resourceful, meaning they help describe a place just in more detail. And those especially can be inspirational. And there's even fiction books, although they may not be 100% true. They can be very descriptive in setting up, sort of this environment or this place that might actually inspire you to look into maybe traveling to that place. For example, there are quite a few books, fiction books, and travel writing books in regards to Paris. And I know that because before I went to Paris a few years ago, I started just kind of reading. Of course, when you start looking at Paris, your feed starts showing you different books about Paris. And so I started reading even fiction books about Paris, and then even some books that someone who actually had been to Paris. So, reminiscent, I've been there twice. So it kind of reminded me and it made me more aware of sort of these surroundings that I would soon find myself in or did find myself in. So I'm here to share how we can use books and make some recommendations. There are so many out there. You're probably very familiar with several of these that I'm going to mention. These are kind of those top travel books that some of them have turned into movies, of course. Eat, Pray, Love, of course, by Elizabeth Gilbert. Under the Tuscan Sun. Oh, how many have watched that movie or read that book multiple times? Me, I have. Maybe because I have wished that were me, right, in Italy. And it has inspired me, in addition to kind of another book by Frances May is called Every Day in Tuscany. That one I read recently, probably about a year or two ago. And her descriptive details of Italy just made my mouth water, because she also talks about food and really makes me want to go back to Italy. But then there's also Wild by Cheryl Strayed. That became a movie. I also have read a few of Anthony Bourdain's books. And of course, he's had some shows out there. World Travel was the most recent one that I read of his. The one that I got really inspired and would highly recommend is called Alone Time. It's 4 Seasons, 4 Cities, and the Pleasures of Solo Travels by Stephanie Rosenblum. And I love it because she does give details. She's a journalist, and so she does give a lot of descriptions. And actually, her recommendations for Paris, I actually took her recommendation for the place that she stayed. So reading books, specifically books where people have actually traveled, maybe they're sharing a memoir, can offer you actual resources, making notes of where they went, looking it up, kind of being that inspiration, knowing someone's been there and they have, good positive reviews about it is a win-win, honestly. Plus, you get to share in their journey as you're reading maybe their memoir. So I'm going to read off a bunch of other ones that I have read. So some of these are older. There is 10 Years a Nomad. I've also read another one of Matt's books. Something, it was $50 a day, but I think he got a new version of that. It's called $75 a day, traveling the world kind of thing. So that's either coming out soon or it is out. There's Without Reservations, The Travels of an Independent Woman. That one is really good. I'm actually in the middle of that one right now, by Alice Steinbach. Hidden Travel, The Secret of Extraordinary Trips, by Stephen Brock. Vagabonding. There's Nomadland, which also turned into a movie. Interesting story there. And really, any book by Bill Bryson. If you're a reader and you also like travel writing books, he's written several books. The one that I kind of liked the most, of course, was A Walk in the Woods and Rediscovering America on the Appalachian Trail. And that actually did turn into a movie as well. So it's kind of a funny movie. The Art of Travel, The Geography of Bliss. Oh, The Motorcycle Diaries. Very good. And then also turned into a movie. And then Tracks also turned into a movie. That was a woman's solo trek across 1,700 miles of Australian outback. Robin Davidson. There's The Year of Living Danishly by Helen Russell. There's, of course, a bunch of books on the Camino, The Way, of course. The Camino by Shirley MacLaine. Invincible by Joy Alway is also about the Camino. I had her on my podcast. I've had several people on my podcast that also have books, and I'll quickly mention those. There is, I mentioned Joy Alway with her Invincible. She also has another book that she just wrote called Beating the Odds. Then I had Sarah Davis. She did Paddle the Nile. That's the name of her book as well. Travel Mania by Karen Gershowitz. And I've also had Kate Evans, who wrote Wonderland. I seem to gravitate towards authors mainly because I just love to read. There are 2 newer books out there also written specifically for women by women who have done some solo travel. Beth Santos has written Wonder Woman, and then the Catch Me If You Can by Jessica Nebongo. And there are tons more out there, women. And there are some that are specific to women, and there are some that are just about travel in general. So if you are looking for a specific place, there could be plenty of resources out there. And that's what I'm getting to. I love reading and being transported to these places. There have been, as I mentioned earlier, some fiction books that have also kind of inspired me. And I know right now, like one of the hot books is called The Women, and it's set in Vietnam during the war. But I've always kind of had Vietnam on my bucket list, top 10 bucket list, that is. It's on the top there. And after reading that, it just kind of, my heart just got drawn to possibly moving it up the list a little bit and seeing if I can make that happen. I'm looking at maybe 2026 for that one. But all these stories can inspire you. And so how can we use books? One thing, you can use books to inspire a new place that maybe you had not considered. Always do your own research as well. So once you have been inspired by a book that you've read about a specific place, look into it. Look into the possibility of going and what that would look like for you. Number 2, I think books also offer us an image of what it could look like, what solo travel specifically could look like, what women traveling could look like, and getting that inspiration, that encouragement from other women, seeing how they have persevered, they have been resilient, they have been courageous, they've had to problem solve, and all those things that go into a potential solo trip. And seeing that or hearing that through the book, how they overcame that can be encouragement to us, especially if you have never gone on a solo trip. This could be another inspirational point. And then thirdly, I love to read. So not only will I be inspired by a place, inspired by the women that have done it, but thirdly, it makes me, of course, want to get out there and travel, be courageous like they were. And for me, also potentially do more writing about my solo trips so other people can glean from my experiences as well. Besides the podcast, yes, bringing that all here full circle on the podcast for you to hear about those experiences is why I'm here. But writing is also another love of mine. And so it's, reading all these books about travel and everything, the women that have done it, but not just the women, but people in general, seeing what they have gone through and those experiences. I learn lessons from them. Learning what to do and what not to do could also be something you can parse from reading these books about travel. Now, there's also just strictly travel resource books, and I do recommend you could either purchase them, but I would check out your library first. There are lots of travel resource books at your library, and if you have what we call in the U.S. maybe some online ability to access your library, there might even be more ability to access maybe something through Kindle. Also through Amazon or through what we call, there's an app called Libby or something like that you might have in your country where you can either do an Audible book, you can do a Kindle, or you can just go to your physical library and get the book. Sometimes it's nice just to have that book as a resource. I did that when I was considering going to Iceland, and I just kind of pulled out. I went to the library and everything was in one place. And that was really nice instead of having to continue doing some internet research and different tabs open. And so it was nice to have it all in one place. So this is how books can inspire your next travel adventure. So what books do you love? What books have you read that have inspired you to travel? I would love to hear any other titles that maybe I missed. As I mentioned, there are lots out there, and I would love to, add them to my list if there's something I haven't read that also is travel related, because I get inspired still to this day by many of those stories and get great ideas from these authors as well. So what have you read, or what could you recommend as a good inspirational travel book? If you have a book to recommend, join us on my Solo Travel Women Over 50 Facebook page. And this is where I'll ask the question, or you can make a comment and just offer any kind of book title that you have read that related to travel. I would love to hear it, love to put it in the comments, and so that the other women in the group can also be inspired by that book. So join the Facebook group if you have not. And again, you can just search Solo Travel for Women Over 50 is the title of the Facebook group. But there's also a link in the show notes, and you can join the group, and we'll have some discussions this week about what travel books have inspired you, or what would you recommend. All right, join the Facebook group.